episode of Diversity Matters, a Fireside chat series hosted by PRCA's Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Committee. I'm Susie Bates. I'm the currently Senior Vice President of IPG DXTRA, working with Weber Shandwick and Golan Group. And we have with us today for our Fireside chat, the lovely Mei Ling Yeow, Deputy Regional Director of Asia Pacific for Archetype. Thank you for joining us, Mei Ling. It's so good to see you.
I know, lovely to be here today.
Fantastic. Well, let me just give a little bit of an intro to where we're going to land, hopefully, in our conversation today. As many of us who are watching and listening know, workplaces today are generally characterized by the ever-changing and evolving demographics that are going on around the world. And Asian countries seem to be struggling with the workplace discrimination and equal rights issues. In Singapore itself, 7 in 10 firms are yet to introduce ED&I policies. This is according to a report by the Singapore National Employers Federation. A quarter of employers surveyed highlighted the lack of related data, such as the gender pay gap analysis or inequality in career progression, as some major challenges towards implementing ED&I. However, as we all know, ED&I continues to be a strategic imperative for businesses to win the battle for talent amid this great attrition that we're all going through, to enable us to better service clients and customers and stay ahead of competition, which is pretty fierce right now out there. So many employers across the Asia Pacific region are keen to implement DE&I strategies, but it's the hows and the whys that seem to continue to mystify. So let's dive in with Mei Ling and see if we can look at some of this from a very practical perspective. So hold on to your seat, Mei Ling, let's dive straight in. If you could, it'd be great for you to share with us where you feel DE&I initiatives stand in the region currently. And in particular, how's the journey been for you and Archetype in getting things moving?
Thank you, Susie, for kicking it off. And I think the preamble that you went through just now, it's not surprising, right? It's not surprising because it's not something that we in APAC, and I say we generally, have focused on specifically. And I think part of it is we are a diverse region as it is, right? In many countries, we either have just one race or ethnicity, or in some countries like Malaysia and Singapore, multiracial already. And given the sheer diversity in ethnicities and culture that's present across APAC, driving DE&I strategies that are locally relevant is a challenge, right? And whether you're a local agency or a multinational agency, it's going to be hard. And in the last few years, coming through the adversity that we've all gone through, we've evolved, and the focus has sharpened in industries like ours, where people are our most important asset. And we all know, you agree, we've had this chat before, that one size fits all doesn't exist for us in APAC. And we know this, I've had conversations with our global teams on how diversity is seen in Asia and how different it is. And getting started isn't easy. So those 7 companies, 7 out of 10 companies out there, it's daunting. Building momentum, creating that sense of belonging, we all agree, never been more important given the talent pressures and the mindsets and the demands that's been evolving. And I know it's hard when we look at it and we want to do it all at once, and we want to get in there and have something solid and push it out. And from my experience at Archetype, sometimes it's good to start small, to start where it makes the most sense, right? Where it hits our people, where it matters, where they can see the real impact. And it's not just about International Women's Day or International Day of Tolerance, one sort of one-off initiatives that happen every year, but do they really mean something to our people? You asked me before how I got into this whole people role, why I focused on people strategies and driving talent within Archetype. And I've been in the industry for 23 years. I went back and I counted how many years.
Wow, impressive.
About 3 years ago, the gap in leadership and ownership for the people strategy at Archetype and APAC. And we were contending, like many agencies out there, with the challenges around recruitment, talent. We were increasingly recruiting from a diverse talent pool.
Right.
Different skill sets, people with different mindsets, and retention and people development continued to be a pain point. And then we got into a pandemic and the whole engagement model evolved. So I think if we look at it at the most basic level, equity and inclusion, putting that lens on employee engagement, life cycle management, it's a big task, and it kept me really, really busy. And I'd say that we've gotten, my team and I, really creative and braver in an effort to ensure that our employees across board feel that they can bring their authentic selves to work, whether it's in a hybrid workplace or now, different models, right? Different things, different models are working in different countries. And fostering that sense of belonging, we talk about it all the time, but it's really work in progress. And that discussion, actions around D&I needs to be on the agenda. If it's not already on your agenda, it needs to be there. And if it is on the leadership agenda, then it needs to be moved up a little bit higher. So that when it comes to equity gaps, inclusion, it's going beyond the visible forms of diversity like race, ethnicity, age. With hybrid working, we've got new norms. Working caregivers, not even just working mothers, working caregivers, dealing with neurodiversity, dealing with mental health biases. Right? So all these things are important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love the fact that you used the word bravery there, Mei Ling. I mean, I think organizations do need to be kind of brave, and they do need to kind of dip their toes in the water, right? And I also love your journey. I think the fact that you were in the business and then you put your hand up for the people stuff is super cool. And I have to say, having been in HR, in PR for, I think probably about 12 years now, having had previous experience in the industry absolutely helps. So well done for flying that flag for us. That's amazing, and I think it's super cool that we're having this conversation, and hopefully there'll be some light bulb moments for people watching and listening in. Can you speak a little bit around the dimensions of diversity that you mentioned earlier, just in terms of the region? As you said, it's very easy to pick one, but I mean, in terms of those equity gaps and exclusion and going beyond those visible terms.
Yeah. If I just look at what I'm working on right now, concerns around giving equal access to learning and development for those that continue to work from home. Right? We've got people who come to the office, engage, and people who may not come to the office very often. They might only come in once or twice a month, once or twice a week. How are we ensuring that we're providing equal access to learning and development for them? So very
right. Yeah.
And then I looked also at progression opportunities. How for those who want to continue working from home or from anywhere, we have a work from anywhere program at Archetype. Those people who want to perhaps take a month off and go and work in their nana's kitchen in another country. How do we ensure that we make that possible and fair to them, as well as to those who are in the office working together? So equity can be, at that working level. It doesn't need to be just about pay scales. And of course, that's important, because we're also working towards a more transparent review process, ensuring that career pathing is transparent. And it's something that that we're working towards, but may not become reality yet in this region, is salary transparency. How do we ensure that salary benchmarking, salary banding, and salary transparency is there, that people feel that it is open, that it is fair? So these aren't sort of unique challenges, and we're cracking away at them. So I'd humbly say that state of D&I is very much work in progress for the region,
Yes.
for our industry, and
Yes.
definitely at Archetype.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. Totally agree. And I think on the L&D front, yeah, having as much access to whatever's available and giving that to our employees. I mean, many of our brands, we have the Headspace app that we provide, and we encourage people, take those few minutes, you know, tune out of work, tune into you, hand on heart, what do I need kind of moments. I want to switch gears a little bit, because when you and I spoke prior to the session, we did land on the big topic of leadership. And, you know, anybody again watching and listening to this is going to be sort of wondering and curious in terms of what, you know, and there's different schools of thoughts on this. I'm super keen to hear your perspective. But I mean, in terms of leadership's role in that ED&I space in the organization, love to hear your thoughts, and how does that kind of then hopefully provide some guidelines or some starting points for companies that want to start their own ED&I work.
So I'm going to be brave.
Be brave,
Yes.
be courageous.
This is what I truly believe, and what I've seen happen, you know, in the company that I work for, that D&I as a platform needs to be driven and led by leadership, by the people at the top. And there'll be different schools of thought to say that, oh, maybe it needs to be driven from the bottom or driven by the masses meaning the people in the organization. I believe that D&I, for it to really take root, needs to be given the importance, the framework, the space by leadership, you know, to create that environment where it's okay to talk about it, where it's okay to prioritize it, and that framework is given. And then it's, you know, you form, backwards. We formed a global council led out of North America, where we're based, where our headquarters are. And that council sort of started, you know, developing a manifesto, developing some global initiatives that they wanted to drive. And then they formed regional councils, which were formed with leadership on it. And there we started talking and discussing about what's possible, what should be the focus, and where we can truly be global and where we need it to be truly local or regional. And then from there, we put out an invitation. You know, we sort of said to people in the offices, we asked for volunteers, people who were passionate about D&I, and said, would you like to be part of a local council, a local task force, where you can see what is important in your office, you can drive things with your local leadership and do that. So in essence, create the framework and then provide freedom within that framework for it to take off.
Right, and I guess that's that is the ultimate leadership challenge, isn't it? Is to sort of be brave, as you rightly said, is be brave and let go, and allow things to evolve without. It's about leadership, creating that platform, but not necessarily doing the work, right? So creating, as you said, that safe space.
Oh, it's still work.
Yes, true.
Yes, it's still work at the top. You know, driving things, driving people to take part, it's always a challenge. You know, we work,
Sure.
You know, I'm sure you've experienced this, where we work with hundreds of people across the region, multiple offices. It's hard to keep the momentum going. But I'd say starting is important, and then keep going.
Right, so that's a great segue into where do we start? Where do organizations and agencies listening and watching today, what's your recommendation in terms of where to start on this journey?
Wow, okay, so how where to start? I think let me draw on my own experience from Archetype, maybe that might make some sense to people who are listening in. And I just go with 5 points so that you can keep track, okay? So one is start with understanding where you are today and the scale of the challenge before you. So before you meaning for your office, for your region, for your business, and marry that with an understanding of your employees' attitudes right now, their wants, their desires, you know, and, you know, understand how people feel about how they're being treated. So how we did that was in 2021, we ran in an inclusive workplace audit. We ran it globally in every single office with all our employees to highlight and find out what the top pain points were by market. So we didn't do a anonymous sort of, it was anonymous because we wanted to ensure people felt comfortable, but we ensured that when we got the data, it was by office. We were able to look at it by office and by region. And it gave us a baseline of where we were at the time, and it helped us identify what we needed to focus on. And I'll share. So 2 of our priorities for this region was developing a strategic plan that reshapes the talent experience for everyone, from recruitment to performance management, to reviews, to salary transparency. That was what people felt were needed.
Right, okay.
And second was implementing a development program focused on cultural awareness and anti-bias. We found out even in markets that are awoken, like Australia, there were still issues of microaggression, issues of perceived bias, and then there was that, in markets like China, that lack of understanding of even what an unconscious bias meant.
Right, I love that idea, and I'm sure our audience will too, of rather than, I think there's still a tendency to sort of finger in the wind, what should we do? Ask the employees, like they're the ones that will tell you what they want you to do, right? And that then drives your strategic thinking moving forward. Brilliant. So what's number 2, Mei Ling?
So number 2 leads from number 1.
Right.
So number 2, education and awareness is often the starting point for a lot of companies. And this was definitely the case for us, as I just said. So following the survey, we ran workshops in every location to share the findings, to raise awareness on unconscious bias and microaggressions that were local and specific to social and cultural norms. I think that's very key. So there's no point taking a global deck and just rolling it out, because it won't have the right perspective. So we ensured that we localized. We actually asked what were microaggressions that people might not be aware that were actually impacting on them, right? So, and then we ran this workshop and we engaged to gain that deeper understanding. So this gave us, once again, that shared baseline to start off with.
Right.
So importantly, you mentioned earlier about companies saying, oh, I don't have the data on wage gaps. I don't have the data on all of that.
Yeah.
You can find that data somewhere, right? But does it really make a difference for your organization, for your company? Maybe not.
And I love that point you made also, Mei Ling, in terms of the global drop down doesn't work in Asia Pacific. Being given a great deck and then asked to drop it down, unless it's tweaked, unless it's steered towards local cultures and understandings. And I mean, I don't know about Archetype, but we spend a lot of time explaining what a microaggression is in this region. A lot of people didn't understand the terminology. Excuse me. Yeah.
Similar experience.
Right.
And then for people who, when they understood, were either shocked.
Yes.
There was a lot of shock going, oh my God, you mean I was doing that, or I was saying that and made people uncomfortable? And what do I do about it now that I know? I think that's the important part.
Absolutely. A lot of awareness from that kind of training for sure. So number 3, I'm keeping track.
Okay. Number 3 is, I think, something that I've lived by, is making a commitment to have an inclusive mindset.
Right.
As I said earlier, it starts with leadership. It carries into our culture. It carries into our work, into our day-to-day. So it's key for an inclusive leadership to formulate steps and create that space for people to be heard, for them to get involved in areas that matter to them. Right? So we developed a charter. We set up that global D&I council, for that overarching goals, and then the regional and local task forces. And in short, it's layering that DE&I lens on everything that we do. It can be things like leave policies. When was the last time, and I asked myself that when we were looking at our leave policies, when was the last time you reviewed leave policies? at the local level, to bring it up to date, to ensure that it was equitable, that it looked after diversity, that it felt inclusive to our staff. You know, and I was embarrassed to say it was a long time ago. And so we went through that process of looking to ensure that we now have caregiver leave, for example. So things like that is important. So when you have an inclusive mindset and you pause when you're doing anything and you say, is that truly inclusive or is it exclusive? If it's pushing people away, then maybe we need to rethink it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you use the word pause. I think anybody listening that knows me really well will say it's my every other word is let's take a pause. and what worked 5 years ago doesn't work anymore. The world has changed, right? I love that. I love that. So number 4, Mei Ling.
Number 4. Prioritize and take small and effective steps. You know, I think acknowledge that your DE&I strategy and plan requires continuous development. Right? It's ongoing initiatives, it's continuous communications, so that it will have that tangible impact on people. It's not one and done. It's not that one initiative and a year that says that, oh, we are a diverse organization. It truly is not, because employees see through that, right? They see that as not to tick the box. But if you really want it to feel like we are living and actually looking at our manifesto and bringing it to life, then take small and effective steps.
That's really good advice, I have to say, because again, I think there's always a tendency to go big and then you end up not delivering, right? Whereas going small and sensible means that you end up delivering more meaningful work. And how about number 5?
Number 5
most important
is the consultant in me. Monitor and adjust as we go.
I love that. I love that.
And how we do that at Archetype is that we include DE&I focus questions in our regular employee engagement survey that goes out. And we use the feedback to review whether or not what we're doing is having an intended impact on our people. If it is, great, we'll do more. If it isn't, then we go and be a little bit curious and wonder why. And then we find our focus. So adjust as we go.
Love it. And I love the word curious as well, because I think we all need to have that healthy curiosity around us in today's world. And we need to be able to say why, right? We need to be curious around that. So let's switch gears slightly now, and sort of we've established that in an ideal world, agencies and organizations will be starting to really develop some form of ED&I policy, procedure, whatever we want to call it. But I mean, from your perspective, what counsel would you give to agencies that are starting to really draft these kinds of policies? And what would be your wise words on that topic?
Oh, I don't know about wise words, practical words, maybe. 3 things to bear in mind. Number 1 is ensuring that the language is clear and concise, and it has to feel authentic for your organization. There's lots of verbiage out there we can borrow from, and yes, we should borrow from the best, but make it authentic, make it fit with your culture, fit for your organization, so that people feel that it's real, that it's authentic. Number 2, I repeat again, it's not a one-size-fits-all. So we can draw on the expertise that's often well-formed, more well-formed from other regions, but always remember that it has to translate for our incredibly diverse region, our culture, our societal norms, which we all know can vary hugely by country to country.
Right, absolutely.
And the third is, once you have these policies, or while you're developing these policies, plan how you're going to communicate them. Plan how you're going to bring it to life in ways that matter to our employees. Because there's no point you have a lovely policy and you stick it on your intranet or stick it on your website, but actually have you rolled it out to staff? Do they Do they understand it? Do they believe it? How can you bring it to life? And if you can do that, then you start to form a DE&I framework for your organization.
Right, absolutely. And that mindset shift, that's so important, isn't it? As you say, you can't just throw a policy out there and say, tick, done, DEI done.
Well,
If
you
only the
can.
words were that simple. When you can, indeed. But don't expect it to be too effective, right? Absolutely fascinating, I have to say, Mei Ling. Now, I have got a couple of other questions before we wrap up today. As you know, the PRCA ED&I committee that Charu and I run together with a great team of people, we are looking at developing our charter across the region for the industry. And what do you think is something that we should definitely be capturing in that charter?
It'd be good for the charter to reflect that DE&I or ED&I, as you coin it, I would say it's the commitment to be deliberate in our actions around DE&I and understanding that it is a journey, that there is a goal that we might never reach, right? But all our actions and things that we do should be deliberate, and we should understand that it will continue to evolve and change and grow and have different focus areas. I know it's hard, in words, but if you can reflect in some way so that the charter makes people or the industry believe and know that D&I is work in progress.
Right.
There will never be that perfect goal.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that the intention behind what you're saying is really strong. And I like the ethos behind that word commitment. It's a commitment to be deliberate, as you said. Nothing's going to happen by chance. We have to do the work. We have to listen. We have to learn. And it's not a tick box. Absolutely. It's never going to be a tick box. It's never going to be over. Like, the work is never going to be done. It's a journey, right?
Yep.
What a lot of takeaways, Mei Ling, from today's conversation. Thank you so much.
It's been lovely talking to you, Susie, and I'm sure we'll have many conversations.
I hope so. I really do hope so. And really, I hope that everyone's listening. I'm sure that everybody listening and watching has got some really key, important takeaways from this conversation. And so I will close with inviting all of you who are watching or listening in today. We would love to hear from you. Your opinion counts, your thoughts count. We'd love to hear from you via email or DM, or even just comment on some of the things that we are discussing, so that we can make sure that these fireside chats are really hitting it for you in terms of what you need to know about. Feel free to share the link here on this conversation with friends and colleagues, and we will look forward to seeing you all and hearing you all again at the next Fireside Chat with PRCA. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Mei Ling.
Thank you, Susie.